Before you listen, understand this. There is a lie you have been taught since childhood. A comforting lie, a safe lie. The lie is that attraction is accidental, that love is pure, that desire simply happens. It doesn't. What you call chemistry is structure. What you call fate is timing. What you call love is often nothing more than unmet hunger finding a mirror. Seduction is not romance. It is not kindness. And it is not evil. It is awareness. It is the ability to see what others refuse to look at. The quiet emptiness inside people, the unspoken longings they hide, the emotional wounds they dress up as preferences. Seduction begins where self-knowledge ends. It feeds on uncertainty, on desire without direction, on hearts that want meaning more than truth. This book is not here to teach you how to make people love you. It is here to show you why they already want to disappear into someone else. You will learn that people are not drawn to who you are. They are drawn to what you represent. A possibility, an escape, a fantasy, a version of themselves they cannot reach alone. The seducer does not push. The seducer does not beg. The seducer positions. And once positioned correctly, people step forward willingly. You will hear uncomfortable truths in these pages. Truths about power, attraction, emotional control, and the invisible mechanics that shape human relationships. You will understand why distance can be more intoxicating than closeness. Why silence can dominate louder than words. Why absence can create obsession where presence fails. This is not a moral book. It will not comfort you, and it will not ask for your approval. It will show you how influence actually works, beneath language, beneath intention, beneath the stories we tell ourselves to sleep at night. If you are looking for romance, close this book. If you are looking for manipulation tricks, you will misunderstand everything. But if you are willing to understand human longing without illusion, then continue. Because once you see seduction clearly, you can never unsee it. And from that moment on, every interaction will feel different. If this perspective intrigues you, if you want to understand the hidden forces shaping desire, power, and attraction, subscribe, like, and share. And step carefully into what comes next. The mirror is waiting. Chapter 1. Seduction begins where force fails. If you believe power is loud, you will never possess it. The first mistake people make when thinking about seduction is assuming it requires action, words, moves, techniques, effort. This belief alone disqualifies them. Seduction does not begin with pursuit. It begins with restraint. Force is obvious. Force announces itself. It pressures, pushes, accelerates. Force wants results now because it fears delay. Seduction, by contrast, is patient. It understands that time is not an obstacle, but a solvent, slowly dissolving resistance, certainty, and self-control. Those who rely on force reveal their intentions immediately. They corner desire, demand answers, rush closeness. And in doing so, they awaken the most ancient defense in the human mind, the need to protect autonomy. Nothing kills attraction faster than the sense of being invaded. Seduction never invades, it invites, but the invitation is never explicit. At its core, seduction operates on a single psychological truth. People desire most intensely what they believe they are choosing freely. The moment someone feels steered, managed, or guided, desire collapses into suspicion. The seducer's task, then, is paradoxical: to influence without appearing to influence, to direct while seeming indifferent, to lead while letting the other believe they are ahead. This is why seduction feels magical to those who experience it, not because it is irrational, but because its logic remains hidden. Seduction begins long before interaction. It begins in how you position yourself in absence, your scarcity, your availability, your unpredictability. The most seductive figures in history were never the most present. They were the most selective. Their attention felt earned, not given. And what is earned is always valued more than what is offered freely. The human mind does not respond to abundance with appreciation. It responds with dismissal. It responds to scarcity with obsession. To seduce, then, is not to impress. It is to create contrast against routine, against noise, against predictability. Seduction enters where life feels dull, mechanical, suffocating. It does not promise happiness. It promises feeling. This is why seduction thrives in moments of transition: emotional fatigue, boredom, quiet dissatisfaction, unspoken longing. People do not seek seduction when they are fulfilled. They become vulnerable when something unnamed begins to ache. The skilled seducer does not manufacture this ache. That would require effort and exposure. Instead, they notice it. They recognize the subtle signs: restlessness, nostalgia, irony, excessive humor, sudden seriousness, signals that the inner structure is already unstable. And then they simply align. Alignment is the true beginning of seduction. Not similarity, but resonance. Speaking not to what someone says they want, but to what their behavior reveals they lack. Listening not for information, but for emotional gaps. Most people talk too much. They fill silence with identity. They explain themselves. They offer narratives. In doing so, they anchor themselves too firmly in reality. Seduction requires looseness, ambiguity, space for projection. The less you define yourself, the more room others have to define you, and they will always define you in ways that serve their own desires. This is not deception. It is cooperation with human nature. Seduction advances through suggestion, not assertion, through mood, not argument, through presence, not performance. A glance held slightly too long, a sentence left unfinished, a departure that arrives before closure. These are not accidents. They are pressure points. Pressure, when applied subtly, feels like gravity rather than force. Another mistake is believing seduction is about gaining approval. Approval is passive. Seduction is active. Approval makes people comfortable. Seduction makes them alert, uncertain, awake. It introduces a question rather than an answer. And the human mind hates unanswered questions. Once a question is planted, the work begins to do itself. Seduction is not constant attention. It is calibrated attention. Too much, and it suffocates. Too little, and it fades. The seducer learns to appear when interest peaks and withdraw when attachment begins to solidify. This oscillation destabilizes emotional equilibrium, creating dependence without obligation. This is why seduction often feels like emotional intensity rather than affection. It disrupts. It excites. It unsettles. It introduces a sense of movement where life felt static. And because it does not demand, it is rarely resisted. Force creates enemies. Seduction creates participants. Those under its influence do not feel conquered. They feel chosen. They reinterpret every interaction as confirmation of mutual desire, unaware that the structure was laid long before they noticed the feeling. The danger of seduction is not that it controls others. The danger is that it works best on those who believe themselves immune. Intelligence does not protect against seduction. Self-awareness does not either. In many cases, they deepen vulnerability because they create confidence, and confidence lowers guards. Seduction bypasses logic by never confronting it. It moves sideways through emotion, imagination, and identity. It does not argue with reason. It renders reason irrelevant. And once reason steps aside, desire begins to speak with authority. This is the foundation. Not tactics, not tricks, not behavior, a mindset. An understanding that power does not rush, does not explain, does not announce. It waits. It watches. It arranges. Those who master seduction do not chase outcomes. They shape environments where outcomes arrive on their own. And those environments are invisible to everyone except the one who built them. This is where seduction begins, not with pursuit, but with patience absence, and the quiet confidence that what is meant to fall eventually will. Chapter 2. The mask you wear will outlive you. The moment you believe you are being authentic, seduction has already abandoned you. Most people are proud of their authenticity. They speak of it as a virtue, a moral high ground, a proof of integrity. They believe being real makes them trustworthy, magnetic human. In the world of seduction, this belief is not just naive, it is fatal. Authenticity is static. Seduction is adaptive. The human mind does not fall in love with truth. It falls in love with meaning, symbolism, and emotional relevance. And meaning is never fixed. It shifts with context, desire, mood, and lack. This is why the same person can feel irresistible in one moment and invisible in another. Not because they changed, but because the situation did. Seduction understands this and exploits it without apology. The seducer does not ask, "Who am I?" they ask, "Who must I be here?" This question unsettles people because it threatens identity. They confuse masks with lies, roles with deception. But social life itself is nothing but layered performance. You already behave differently with a friend than with a stranger, differently in power than in vulnerability. Seduction merely removes the illusion that this is accidental. Every environment rewards a different face. The mistake is not wearing a mask. The mistake is wearing the wrong one, or worse, wearing the same one everywhere. Seductive figures throughout history were not admired for their honesty. They were admired for their consistency of illusion. They understood that people do not want access to your inner truth. They want an experience that reflects their inner world back to them in a flattering, intoxicating way. This is where archetypes emerge. An archetype is not a personality. It is an emotional function, a role that activates fantasy, memory, longing, or escape. When someone encounters an archetype that resonates with their unmet needs, they do not analyze it, they respond to it. Instinctively, viscerally. This response feels personal, even intimate. But it is not about you, it is about what you represent. The siren does not seduce because of beauty alone, but because she embodies release, freedom from restraint, permission to desire without guilt. The rake does not attract because of devotion, but because obsession makes others feel uniquely chosen. The ideal lover captivates not through perfection, but through precision. Becoming exactly what the other person feels has been missing. Most people fail at seduction because they want to be liked by everyone. This desire dilutes their presence. It forces compromise, predictability, and emotional safety. Seduction requires none of these. Seduction thrives on polarity. To be seductive is to accept that you will repel many in order to haunt a few. This is why archetypes are powerful. They sharpen edges. They exaggerate traits. They make you legible at an emotional level while remaining ambiguous intellectually. People know how you make them feel, but not why, and what cannot be explained becomes obsession. The mask, when worn correctly, does not feel artificial. It feels inevitable. It aligns with fragments of your nature and amplifies them into something symbolic. This is why the most effective masks are not invented, they are selected. You do not create a seductive role from nothing. You excavate it. You observe what comes naturally to you. Intensity, warmth, distance, playfulness, mystery, devotion, contradiction. Then you remove everything unnecessary and sharpen what remains. The mask is not a lie layered on top of you. It is a reduction, a focused version of yourself designed to resonate. But resonance always requires sacrifice. When you commit to a seductive archetype, you abandon the comfort of being fully known. You relinquish the right to explain yourself. You accept misunderstanding as a tool rather than a threat. This is why seduction is emotionally demanding. It asks you to tolerate projection without correcting it. People will see what they want to see, and you must let them. The moment you clarify, justify, or normalize yourself, the spell weakens. Explanation is anti-seductive. It collapses fantasy into fact, and fact is rarely intoxicating. This does not mean deception through false promises. It means discipline through silence. It means understanding that what you withhold often matters more than what you reveal. Seductive masks also create distance, and distance is essential. Familiarity erodes desire, not because people are shallow, but because the unknown stimulates imagination. Imagination fills gaps with longing. The known fills gaps with certainty. Certainty is safe. Safety is boring. The seductive individual maintains a controlled distance even in closeness. They share emotion, not exposure, presence, not accessibility. They allow intimacy to deepen without becoming mundane. This is not cruelty. It is structure. Without structure, desire decays. The danger, of course, lies in forgetting the mask as a tool. Many lose themselves in their roles, becoming prisoners of their own performances. They confuse being desired with being valued. They confuse attention with connection. This leads to emptiness, the kind that grows louder the more applause you receive. But seduction was never meant to fill you. It is meant to move others. The true seducer steps in and out of the mask at will. They are not intoxicated by admiration. They are alert to it. They observe its effects, its limits, its decay. They know when to intensify and when to withdraw. This is why seduction is not sustainable without self-awareness. Not moral awareness, strategic awareness. You must know when the role has done its work. The mask's power lies in timing. Enter too soon, and it feels theatrical. Stay too long, and it becomes transparent. Seduction exists in the narrow window where illusion still breathes. And when that window closes, you leave. This departure is not failure, it is mastery. Because the greatest seductions are not remembered for their duration, but for their impact. They leave a residue. a distortion in memory, a standard that future encounters fail to meet. The person does not remember what you did. They remember how they felt when they were with you. That feeling becomes a reference point. A quiet comparison, a ghost. This is how the mask outlives the moment. In the end, seduction is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming less obvious, less predictable, less accessible. It is about allowing others to complete the image you present, investing their emotions into something they believe they are discovering. The mask does not hide you. It edits you. And in that editing, something powerful happens. You stop asking to be seen and start allowing yourself to be interpreted. Interpretation creates attachment. Attachment creates gravity. Those who understand this do not beg for attention. They curate absence. They do not reveal truth. They offer symbols, and in a world starved for meaning, symbols always seduce more deeply than facts ever could. The mask you wear is not who you are, but if worn correctly, it will become what others remember long after you are gone. Chapter 3. Mystery is not a trait, it is a strategy. The moment you are fully understood, you are already replaceable. People speak of mystery as if it were an accident of personality. They say someone is naturally mysterious, as though ambiguity were something you are born with, like eye color or temperament. This belief is comforting because it removes responsibility. It allows people to excuse their transparency as fate rather than choice. In truth, mystery is engineered. It is not silence alone. It is not distance alone. It is not introversion or aloofness. Mystery is the deliberate management of information. What is revealed, what is delayed, and what is never confirmed. It is the space between what is seen and what is known. And that space is where seduction breathes. The human mind is a pattern-making machine. When confronted with incomplete information, it does not wait patiently. It fills the gaps. It imagines, projects, constructs narratives. This process feels active, personal, intimate. The mind mistakes its own effort for connection. That is why mystery is so powerful. It turns the other person into a participant. When everything about you is visible, the mind rests. When you are partially hidden, the mind works. And what the mind works on, it begins to value. Seduction does not require you to be extraordinary. It requires you to be unfinished. Most people sabotage themselves by over-explaining. They believe clarity builds trust, that transparency creates intimacy, that being fully known prevents misunderstanding. In functional relationships, this may be true. In seduction, it is destructive. Explanation collapses tension. Every detail you offer too early becomes a closed door. Every story told completely becomes inert. There is nothing left to uncover, no reason to lean forward, no invitation for curiosity. Mystery does not lie in being evasive, it lies in being selective. The seductive individual understands that not every truth needs a stage. They share fragments, not wholes, impressions, not confessions. They allow others to sense depth without mapping it. Depth, when implied, is far more compelling than depth when demonstrated. This is why mystery often appears calm. Calmness suggests control. Control suggests something withheld. And what is withheld is assumed to be valuable. People are drawn not to chaos, but to contained intensity. To cultivate mystery, one must first abandon the desire to be understood. This is uncomfortable. Humans crave recognition. We want others to get us, to see our intentions clearly, to interpret us correctly. But seduction demands the opposite. It requires you to tolerate ambiguity, even misinterpretation, without correcting it. Misinterpretation is not an insult. It is evidence of engagement. When someone misreads you, they are thinking about you. When they speculate, analyze, or ask others about you, the seduction is already underway. The story no longer belongs to you alone. Mystery also depends on rhythm. Constant availability dissolves intrigue. Constant absence erases presence. The balance lies in appearing and disappearing with precision, entering moments of emotional relevance, exiting before saturation. The seductive presence arrives slightly late and leaves slightly early. This creates a psychological residue. People replay interactions, searching for meaning in what was not said. They remember tone more than content, glances more than words, pauses more than declarations. Pauses are where desire grows. The mistake many make is confusing mystery with coldness. Coldness alienates, mystery invites. The difference is subtle but essential. Mystery offers warmth without access, interest without pursuit, attention without explanation. It allows closeness without familiarity. This is why mystery often feels elegant. It is restraint disguised as depth. Another element of mystery is unpredictability, not chaos, but deviation from expectation. Predictable people feel safe, but safety does not sustain desire. Desire feeds on uncertainty, on the feeling that the next interaction may reveal something new, destabilizing, or emotionally charged. Unpredictability should never be erratic. It should be meaningful. A sudden seriousness from someone usually playful, a moment of humor from someone typically reserved, a display of vulnerability that disappears as quickly as it arrived. These shifts create dimensionality. They suggest an inner life that cannot be summarized. And what cannot be summarized resists dismissal. Mystery also thrives on non-closure, endings that do not fully conclude, conversations that trail off, gestures that imply more than they deliver. The mind hates unresolved loops. It returns to them compulsively. This is why seduction often feels haunting. The person is not always present, but they are repeatedly remembered. The seductive individual does not aim to dominate attention. They aim to recur. This recurrence is strengthened by emotional contrast, intensity followed by distance, warmth followed by neutrality, interest followed by silence. These shifts create an internal oscillation in the other person: hope, doubt, longing, anticipation. Seduction is not a steady flame. It is a controlled flicker. Mystery also requires confidence in scarcity. If you believe you are replaceable, you will overcompensate. You will reveal too much, pursue too aggressively, seek reassurance. This behavior dissolves intrigue instantly. Mystery assumes value without proof. It does not explain why it matters. It behaves as though it already does. This assumption changes everything. It affects posture, speech, pacing, decisions. The mysterious individual is not rushed. They do not chase responses. They do not fill silence. They allow others to approach. This is not arrogance. It is containment. Contained people feel solid. Solid people feel significant. The danger of mystery is exposure through repetition. Over time, patterns emerge. Over time, habits reveal themselves. Mystery must evolve. It is not a permanent state, but a process of continual adjustment. Those who rely on a single version of themselves eventually become readable. Seduction demands evolution, subtle shifts in tone, interest, availability. This does not mean manipulation. It means attentiveness to emotional climate. Mystery is relational, not solitary. It exists in the space between two minds, responding to tension, curiosity, resistance. It is alive, and like anything alive, it must be maintained. In the end, mystery is not about hiding your life. It is about refusing to make yourself emotionally convenient. Convenience kills desire. Effort fuels it. Phoo! When someone must work to understand you, they invest. When they invest, they attach. When they attach, they care. And care, once activated, seeks proximity. The most seductive individuals are not those who reveal secrets. They are those who make others feel that a secret exists, and that it may never be fully revealed. This is the quiet power of mystery, not as a personality, but as a strategy that turns absence into gravity and silence into seduction. When you are no longer fully known, you are no longer easily forgotten. And in a world obsessed with exposure, that is a rare and dangerous advantage. Chapter 4. Desire is created by withholding, not giving. The more you offer freely, the less you will ever be desired. People are taught from an early age that attraction grows through generosity. Give attention, give affection, give reassurance, give time. Give time. The assumption is simple. The more you provide, the more valuable you become. Seduction exists to expose how false this belief is. Desire does not respond to abundance with gratitude. It responds with indifference. What is easily obtained loses psychological weight. What is delayed, restricted, or uncertain grows in importance. This is not cruelty. It is cognition. The human mind assigns value based on effort, not availability. Withholding is not absence, it is tension. It is the intentional refusal to satisfy desire at the moment it appears, allowing it to mature, sharpen, and destabilize. When done without hostility, withholding feels magnetic rather than rejecting. It suggests depth, autonomy, and self-control. Self-control is seductive because it implies choice. Those who give too quickly communicate a dangerous message. I need this more than you do. Neediness collapses power instantly. It shifts the dynamic from mutual attraction to emotional imbalance. Seduction cannot survive imbalance. The seductive individual understands that desire must be cultivated, not fed. They create hunger, not relief. They allow longing to exist without rushing to silence it. This requires emotional discipline, the ability to tolerate another person's wanting without easing it. Most people cannot do this. They become uncomfortable when someone desires them. They rush to reciprocate, clarify, reassure. In doing so, they destroy the very tension that created attraction. Seduction demands restraint in moments when instinct urges generosity. This restraint must never appear punitive. Withholding is not withdrawal fueled by fear or insecurity. It is quiet selectivity. The difference lies in emotional tone. Withdrawal feels cold. Withholding feels composed. Composure suggests abundance. To withhold effectively, one must first detach from outcome. Desire feeds on uncertainty. The moment you begin to chase a specific result, your behavior leaks urgency. Urgency exposes dependence. Dependence erodes attraction. The seducer remains present but unsatisfying, engaged but incomplete, interested but unresolved. This contradiction unsettles the mind. It creates an internal imbalance that the other person seeks to correct. Correction becomes pursuit. Withholding also creates space for imagination. When something is not given, the mind fills the gap with fantasy. Fantasy intensifies emotion far more effectively than reality ever could. Reality satisfies and ends. Fantasy multiplies and continues. This is why consummation often ends seduction, not because intimacy is wrong, but because timing matters. When satisfaction arrives before desire peaks, the experience feels flat. When desire is stretched, delayed, frustrated slightly but repeatedly, satisfaction becomes intoxicating. Seduction is not denial, it is postponement. The seductive individual knows when to give, but only after enough emotional pressure has accumulated to make the moment meaningful. Giving without pressure is forgettable. Giving after tension is unforgettable. This principle extends beyond physical intimacy. It applies to emotional disclosure, availability, reassurance, and commitment. Every form of giving must be earned through time and engagement. Otherwise, it devalues itself. This does not mean playing games. Games are transparent. Withholding is subtle. It is woven into rhythm, not strategy. It feels natural because it aligns with a deeper truth. Value grows through investment. People cherish what costs them something. Another aspect of withholding is the ability to say no without explanation. Explanations weaken boundaries. Boundaries, when calm and unapologetic, signal self-respect. Self-respect attracts. The seductive individual does not justify their limits. They do not negotiate their availability. They do not apologize for absence. They allow others to adapt. Adaptation increases attachment. When someone adjusts their schedule, expectations, or emotional posture to accommodate you, they invest. Investment creates ownership. Ownership creates desire. This is why over-accommodation destroys seduction. It reverses the flow. You become the one adapting, adjusting, bending. The other person relaxes, desire fades. Withholding also preserves mystery. Giving reveals. Withholding conceals. Concealment invites curiosity. Curiosity sustains attention. Attention sustained over time transforms into fixation. The danger of withholding lies in excess. Too much distance feels like rejection. Too much delay feels manipulative. The balance is delicate. The seducer must sense emotional thresholds and respond without collapsing tension entirely. This requires attunement, awareness of emotional temperature. When desire cools, warmth must return. When desire overheats, distance restores intrigue. Seduction is not linear. It is cyclical. Withholding operates in cycles. Those who master this cycle create emotional momentum. Those who fail either overwhelm or disappear. Both outcomes end seduction. It is also important to understand that withholding only works when something is worth withholding. You must possess or represent a quality that resonates: presence, depth, intensity, freedom, understanding. Withholding emptiness breeds nothing. This is why seduction begins with internal richness. Not loud confidence, but quiet fullness. The sense that your life continues regardless of another's response. Independence is the silent foundation of withholding. If you cannot walk away, you cannot withhold. If you fear loss, you will overgive. Seduction demands the strength to tolerate loss without panic. This strength is felt immediately. It permeates speech, posture, pacing. It removes desperation from interaction. It creates a sense of option. An option is intoxicating. Those who withhold correctly do not frustrate others. They awaken them. They awaken longing. They awaken pursuit. They awaken desire that feels self-generated. This is the ultimate seduction, making someone believe the hunger came from within. In a world where everything is available instantly, withholding feels radical. It feels powerful. It reintroduces effort, anticipation, and meaning into interaction. The seductive individual does not flood. They drip, and each drop increases thirst. In the end, desire does not want to be satisfied immediately. It wants to be felt, prolonged, intensified, remembered. Those who understand this do not rush to give. They allow desire to mature until giving becomes inevitable. And when it finally arrives, it feels earned, profound, and dangerously memorable. This is why seduction is not built on generosity, but on restraint. Because what you withhold today may control what someone desires tomorrow. Chapter 5. Dia des currency, and you are always paying. Where your attention goes, your power quietly follows. No one teaches you this early enough. Attention is not neutral. It is not harmless. It is not infinite. Every moment you direct it towards someone, something shifts, subtly, irreversibly. Attention is validation without words. It is endorsement without permission. It is the most underestimated form of surrender. Seduction begins the moment you understand this. Most people believe attraction is created by impressing, pleasing, or persuading. They focus on performance. The seducer focuses on focus. Who watches whom? Who listens longer? Who remembers details? Who leans in emotionally first? The one who gives the most attention loses leverage. This feels counterintuitive because attention is framed as kindness. But psychologically, sustained attention communicates priority. Priority creates hierarchy. The one who prioritizes becomes lower in the hierarchy than the one being prioritized. This is not moral judgment. It is behavioral economics of the mind. When you give attention freely, you reduce its value. When you give it selectively, it gains weight. Scarcity sharpens awareness. The mind notices what is intermittent. What is constant fades into background noise. Seduction requires intentional distribution of attention. The seductive individual listens deeply, but not endlessly. They notice, but do not orbit. They remember, but do not obsess. Their attention feels precise, not abundant. This precision makes it felt. Being seen briefly but intensely is more powerful than being seen constantly and casually. Most people flood others with attention when attraction appears. They text quickly. They respond instantly. They ask follow-up questions compulsively. They analyze tone. They replay moments. Their attention becomes loud. Loud attention repels. It creates pressure. It exposes insecurity. It communicates emotional imbalance. Even if the content is flattering, the frequency suffocates. The seductive individual understands pacing. They allow silence to exist. Silence is not emptiness. It is space for anticipation. When attention withdraws slightly, the mind leans forward. Lean forward long enough and desire activates. Attention also shapes identity. People become more of what they receive attention for. Compliment someone repeatedly for a trait, and they inhabit it more fully. Ignore a behavior and it weakens. This gives attention a sculpting quality. The seducer uses this carefully. They reinforce what they want to see by noticing it, briefly. They ignore what diminishes attraction without confrontation. Attention becomes reward. Absence becomes correction. This dynamic operates below conscious awareness, which is why it feels organic rather than manipulative when done correctly. Another critical truth. Attention creates attachment more reliably than affection. Affection can be enjoyed without dependency. Attention creates habit. Habit creates expectation. Expectation creates emotional vulnerability. People do not miss what they enjoyed once. They miss what became part of their mental routine. By entering someone's routine selectively, you insert yourself into their internal rhythm. You become a pattern. Patterns are hard to break. However, the seducer never allows themselves to become predictable. Predictability neutralizes attention's power. If someone knows when you will respond, how you will react, and what you will say, attention loses its edge. Uncertainty keeps attention awake. This does not mean inconsistency born of chaos. It means intentional variation, sometimes warmth, sometimes distance, sometimes depth, sometimes lightness. The emotional range remains coherent, but the timing does not. This keeps the nervous system alert. One of the most dangerous mistakes is over-explaining. Explanation is attention extended beyond necessity. It teaches others to expect access to your reasoning, your emotions, your time. Seduction thrives on partial visibility. You do not owe full access to your inner world. The seductive individual reveals selectively. They allow curiosity to exist unanswered. They let questions linger, revisory. Lingering questions occupy attention long after interaction ends. This is why mystery is not about secrecy, but about restraint. Attention also amplifies flaws. When you watch someone too closely, imperfections grow larger. When you step back, the mind idealizes. Distance polishes perception. Seduction requires strategic distance. This does not mean emotional coldness. It means resisting the urge to monitor. Monitoring is surveillance. Surveillance kills attraction. It signals fear of loss. Confidence does not track constantly. It trusts selectively. Another layer of attention is emotional reaction. Strong reactions, jealousy, irritation, excitement, are forms of attention intensified. The seductive individual remains measured. They do not reward provocation with visible emotional spikes. Emotional neutrality frustrates manipulation and increases intrigue. When someone cannot easily move your emotional state, they become more invested in trying. Investment deepens attachment. Attachment increases desire. This is why calm is seductive. Calm suggests internal stability. Stability feels rare. Rare feels valuable. Attention must also be reclaimed internally. If your thoughts revolve around someone excessively, you lose grounding. Seduction begins with self-possession. You must own your attention before directing it. Meditation, discipline, solitude. These are not spiritual luxuries. They are tools of control. The one who controls their attention controls their emotional economy. Those who cannot regulate attention become reactive. Reactivity is predictable. Predictability dissolves allure. The seductive individual chooses where their mind rests. They do not allow attraction to hijack identity. They remain themselves first interested second. This ordering is felt instinctively. Finally, understand this. Attention is remembered more than words. People forget compliments. They remember how present you were, or how absent you were, or how suddenly your attention shifted. These shifts leave marks. Seduction is not about being everywhere in someone's life. It is about appearing at moments that matter, then disappearing before familiarity dulls impact. Arrive, be felt. Withdraw. This rhythm trains desire. In a culture of constant stimulation, focused attention feels intimate. In a culture of oversharing, selective attention feels powerful. Those who master attention do not chase. They position in others without realizing why, begin to orbit. Because attention is currency, and you never forget who made you feel rich or who suddenly stopped paying. This is the silent economy of seduction, and once you see it, you will never spend carelessly again. Chapter 6. The Allure of Contradiction. What cannot be defined cannot be controlled, and that is exactly why it becomes irresistible. The mind seeks clarity, labels, categories, definitions that reduce uncertainty, yet desire moves in the opposite direction. It gravitates toward what resists classification, what refuses to settle, what feels internally coherent but externally paradoxical. Contradiction is not confusion. It is complexity. The most seductive figures in history were never simple. They were calm yet dangerous, gentle yet unyielding, intimate yet unreachable. These oppositions did not cancel each other out. They amplified each other. The human mind, unable to resolve the tension, remained engaged. Engagement becomes fascination. People crave what they cannot define because definition ends curiosity. Once something is understood, the mind relaxes. Relaxation dissolves desire. Seduction thrives in unresolved mental loops. Questions without closure, impressions without explanation. Contradiction keeps the loop open. When someone appears consistent in every context, they become predictable. Predictability is comforting, but comfort is not seductive. Seduction requires a slight destabilization, enough to intrigue, not enough to threaten. The contradictory individual offers stability wrapped in surprise. This is why duality is magnetic. strength paired with softness, authority paired with empathy, detachment paired with intensity. These combinations create psychological friction. The mind cannot collapse them into a single label, so it keeps watching. Androgyny is one expression of this principle, not merely in gender, but in energy. Masculine decisiveness blended with feminine receptivity. Assertiveness softened by sensitivity. Presence without domination. Grace without submission. This balance unsettles expectation. Expectation is built on cultural templates. When someone steps outside those templates without rejecting them entirely, they create ambiguity. Ambiguity invites projection. People begin to fill the gaps with their own fantasies, desires, and meanings. Projection deepens attachment. The seductive individual does not announce contradiction. They embody it. They do not explain their complexity. Explanation resolves tension. They allow others to experience it directly without guidance. This experience feels personal, intimate, and unique. Another layer of contradiction lies in emotional availability. Being emotionally present without being emotionally dependent. Expressive without being exposed. Warm without being consuming. Most people swing between extremes, either guarded or flooded. The seductive individual occupies the middle space. This middle is rare. Rare feels valuable. Contradiction also protects autonomy. When someone cannot reduce you to a role, they cannot predict you fully. This preserves freedom. Freedom is seductive because it signals inner sovereignty. Those who are free from rigid identity do not perform. They respond. Identity, when clung to, becomes a cage. This is who I am often translates to, this is how I must behave. Behavior becomes repetitive. Repetition dulls attraction. The seductive individual remains fluid. They do not reject identity. They transcend fixation on it. They allow themselves to adapt without apology. Adaptation is not inconsistency when guided by internal coherence rather than external validation. This coherence is felt even when behavior shifts. Contradiction also disrupts power dynamics. When someone expects dominance and meets restraint, or expects submission and meets strength, their internal scripts fail. Script failure forces attention. Attention fuels desire. This is why forbidden balance attracts, balance that defies norms. Balance that feels instinctively right but socially undefined. It carries a sense of quiet rebellion. Rebellion attracts not because it opposes, but because it liberates. People are drawn to those who appear unbound by expectation. Not reckless, but unconfined. There is a difference. Recklessness is chaotic. Unconfined is deliberate. Deliberate freedom feels safe enough to approach and dangerous enough to excite. Contradiction also allows intimacy without erosion. Without erosion. When someone is fully knowable, intimacy plateaus. When someone remains partially unknowable, intimacy deepens without exhausting mystery. Mystery does not mean secrecy, it means multiplicity. The seductive individual contains multitudes without fragmenting. They can be serious without heaviness, playful without frivolity, moral without rigidity, dark without cruelty. These internal balances communicate psychological maturity. Maturity is attractive because it promises depth without volatility. Another crucial aspect is emotional contradiction, the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by feeling. Passion contained by discipline, vulnerability supported by strength. This containment is felt as safety. People trust those who can hold emotion without collapsing. Trust allows desire to explore without fear. Fear interrupts seduction. Contradiction also resists consumption. In a culture that devours identities, styles, and personalities rapidly, what cannot be easily summarized survives longer. Longevity increases value. The seductive individual is not easily copied. They do not present a formula. They present a presence. Presence is contradictory by nature, fully here, yet impossible to grasp. The moment you try to own it, it shifts. This movement keeps desire alive. However, contradiction must be authentic. Manufactured paradox feels hollow. The mind senses performance. Performance invites analysis. Analysis kills seduction. Authentic contradiction emerges from self-knowledge, from integrating opposing traits rather than suppressing them, from accepting internal complexity without needing to resolve it publicly. Those who are at peace with their contradictions do not defend them. Defense reveals insecurity. The seductive individual allows others to be confused without correcting them. Confusion, when safe, is intoxicating. It keeps the emotional system engaged. This does not mean manipulation. It means restraint from over-definition. Definition is a form of closure. Seduction delays closure. Freedom from identity also protects against attachment traps. When you are not performing a role, others cannot demand consistency from a mask. They must relate to the present moment, not a fixed image. This keeps interaction alive. In the end, contradiction seduces because it mirrors the human condition. People are not singular. They are layered, conflicting, evolving. When someone embodies this truth openly, it resonates. Resonance feels like recognition, and recognition, when incomplete, becomes desire. The most alluring individuals are not those who are flawless, but those who are integrated, who can hold darkness without being consumed, who can express light without denying shadow. They are not puzzles to be solved. They are landscapes to be explored. And exploration never ends where definition begins. This is the power of contradiction, not to confuse, but to captivate. Chapter 7. Anti-Seduction. How Power is Destroyed. Warning. Nothing repels desire faster than the certainty that you need it to survive. Seduction does not fail loudly. It collapses quietly through behaviors that feel reasonable, even virtuous in the moment. Impatience, pressure disguised as honesty, emotional openness that arrives too early, certainty presented as confidence. These are not flaws of character. They are failures of timing and self-regulation. Anti-seduction is not the opposite of seduction. It is its shadow. It is what happens when hunger becomes visible. Power dissolves the moment desire becomes a requirement rather than a choice. Impatience is the first fracture. It emerges when attraction awakens and the mind rushes toward resolution. The need to define the connection, to accelerate intimacy, to secure reassurance. Impatience signals fear. Fear that if things remain undefined, they will disappear. Fear leaks through behavior. It tightens speech. It speeds responses. It crowds space. Even when words are polite, the energy presses forward. Pressure does not need to be spoken to be felt. The nervous system recognizes it immediately. Pressure creates resistance. Seduction requires spaciousness. It needs room to breathe, expand, retreat, and return. Impatience collapses this space. It turns interaction into demand. Demand transforms attraction into obligation. Obligation suffocates desire. Another common destroyer of power is the arrogance of certainty, declaring intentions too early, predicting outcomes, speaking as though the connection is already defined. Certainty feels confident to the speaker, but invasive to the listener. Certainty steals choice. Seduction thrives on voluntary engagement. When certainty removes ambiguity, it removes agency. The other person no longer explores, they react. Reaction is not desire. Reaction is defense. Confidence invites, certainty corners. The seductive individual understands that clarity must be earned through shared experience, not imposed through declaration. They allow meaning to emerge organically. They resist the urge to label prematurely. Labels end curiosity. Neediness is the most lethal form of anti-seduction. It rarely announces itself openly. It hides in excessive availability, in constant reassurance seeking, in over-explaining, in emotional transparency that arrives before trust has formed. Neediness communicates a single message: you are the source of my stability. No one wants to be the foundation of someone else's emotional survival. It is too heavy, too risky, too consuming. Desire requires lightness, the sense that attraction enhances life, not sustains it. Emotional hunger is felt immediately. It appears as intensity without grounding, passion without containment, vulnerability without strength. These qualities may evoke sympathy, but sympathy is not seduction. Sympathy places the other person above you. Seduction requires equilibrium. The fatal weakness of emotional hunger is that it reverses polarity. Instead of attraction flowing naturally, it demands reciprocation. Instead of curiosity, it seeks reassurance. Instead of presence, it seeks proof. Proof kills mystery. People who are emotionally hungry attempt to close the gap too quickly. They overshare to accelerate intimacy. They confess to force connection. They mistake exposure for closeness. True closeness is built, not confessed into existence. Another form of anti-seduction is overinvestment before reciprocity. Giving more than is received, planning ahead uninvited, adjusting one's life too readily. This creates imbalance. Imbalance creates discomfort. Comfort requires symmetry. Seduction does not mean withholding care. It means matching energy. When one side overextends, the other retreats instinctively to restore balance. This retreat is often misinterpreted as cruelty or avoidance when it is simply self-preservation. The seductive individual never tries to compensate for uncertainty by increasing effort. They tolerate uncertainty. Tolerance of uncertainty signals strength. It communicates that your identity does not hinge on outcome, that your life remains intact regardless of response. This is deeply attractive. Anti-seduction also appears through emotional volatility, strong reactions, visible jealousy, mood swings tied to another's attention. These behaviors signal lack of internal regulation. Unregulated emotion feels dangerous. People may be drawn briefly to intensity, but they do not remain where stability feels threatened. Seduction requires emotional containment, the ability to feel without spilling. Spilling creates mess. Mess requires cleanup. No one desires responsibility before intimacy. Another subtle destroyer is validation seeking, fishing for compliments, asking indirect questions to confirm attraction, reacting visibly to praise or lack thereof. These behaviors externalize self-worth. Externalized self-worth is fragile. The seductive individual validates themselves internally. Compliments are received calmly. Silence is tolerated. Ambiguity does not provoke panic. Calm in the face of uncertainty is power. Anti-seduction often masquerades as honesty. I just want to be clear about how I feel. I don't want to play games. These statements are not wrong, but timing transforms truth into pressure. Truth delivered without readiness becomes burden. Seduction respects psychological pacing. It does not rush emotional exposure. It allows trust to form before weight is applied. Weight before foundation causes collapse. Another fatal error is overavailability. Being always reachable, always responsive, always accommodating. Availability without boundaries removes value. Value requires limits. Boundaries do not repel desire. They define it. They create edges. Edges shape form. Form attracts. Without boundaries, attention becomes background noise. The seductive individual chooses availability deliberately. They are present, not pervasive. Interested, not orbiting. This selectivity preserves intrigue. Anti-seduction also includes resentment, giving with expectation. When expectation is unmet, bitterness emerges. This bitterness leaks subtly through tone, sarcasm, or withdrawal. Resentment poisons attraction. True seduction gives without attachment to outcome. Attachment converts generosity into transaction. Transactions invite evaluation. Evaluation kills emotion. Emotion thrives in freedom. Perhaps the deepest weakness of emotional hunger is its self-betrayal. In the attempt to secure connection, individuals abandon their own rhythms, values, and boundaries. They become smaller versions of themselves. Smaller selves are less attractive. Seduction requires fullness, a sense that you are already complete. That desire is an addition, not a rescue. This completeness cannot be faked. It is felt through stillness, through patience, through restraint, through the ability to walk away without drama. Walking away is not rejection. It is self-respect. Those who cannot walk away will always chase. Those who chase surrender power. Those who surrender power cannot seduce. Anti-seduction is not moral failure. It is loss of center. The moment you place another person at the center of your emotional universe, attraction collapses under its own weight. The seductive individual keeps themselves at the center, not selfishly, but structurally. They do not need desire to exist. They allow desire to approach. In a world of urgency, patience is magnetic. In a world of pressure, ease is powerful. In a world of hunger, fullness is rare. Seduction survives only where power is preserved, and power is preserved by those who never confuse wanting with needing. Because the moment desire becomes hunger, it stops being attractive and starts becoming a liability. Chapter 8. Silent Seductive Killers. The quietest assassins of desire are invisible until they leave nothing left to want. Seduction is a fragile ecosystem. A single misstep unnoticed in the moment can silently corrode the very foundations of attraction. These are not dramatic betrayals, explosive arguments, or blatant insults. These are subtle, nearly invisible killers, hidden in the guise of virtue, charm, or generosity. They move quietly, leaving the mind and heart depleted, the flame extinguished, and the target wandering unconsciously repelled. Generosity is often mistaken for seduction. Giving freely, offering attention, sharing time and care, these qualities can seduce when balanced, deliberate, and mysterious. But generosity becomes predictability when repeated without variation or intentionality. When every gesture follows a known pattern, the mind anticipates it. Anticipation kills intrigue. Desire is fed by novelty, by the subtle tension of uncertainty. The silent killer in generosity is the loss of suspense. Predictable attention may appear appealing at first, but the human psyche craves irregularity. It seeks the unexpected. When you consistently give, always respond, and predictably satisfy, you shift from enchanting presence to background comfort. Comfort is not seduction. Comfort breeds detachment, indifference, and eventually disengagement. Consider the person who is always present, always available, and always agreeable. Their generosity is unwavering, seemingly a gift. But the target's brain no longer works to earn access, to seek approval, to chase the spark. Without the subtle friction of uncertainty, desire stagnates. This friction, the invisible tension between approach and retreat, is what fuels fascination. Remove it, and attraction diminishes silently. Talking too much is another subtle assassin. Words are seductive when measured, weighted, and mysterious. Silence, carefully applied, creates space for imagination, projection, and emotional engagement. Excessive talking is the enemy of all three. Constant flow of information fills the mind of the target, leaving no room for fantasy or interpretation. Over-talking signals a lack of internal containment. It broadcasts the speaker's need to control perception, to preemptively manage judgment, or to manufacture intimacy. Seduction collapses because desire requires co-creation. It thrives when the target is invited to fill the gaps, to wonder, to question. The incessant monologue substitutes curiosity with comprehension, fascination with understanding, and emotional engagement with predictable narrative. Every word spoken in excess is a nail in the coffin of mystery. Mystery is not obscurity. It is the deliberate withholding of complete access. It is the art of letting another person linger in the unknown just long enough to become captivated. Once that unknown is fully revealed through words, gestures, or explanation, the spell weakens. The mind closes the loop. Desire diminishes. Moral superiority is perhaps the quietest and deadliest killer of all. Judgmental tone, the ethical posture, the subtle imposition of values and standards, all signal that one's presence comes with a price, compliance, approval, or submission. Seduction requires freedom. It flourishes when the target feels unpressured, unjudged, and accepted. Moral imposition transforms attraction into resistance. Those who wield moral superiority unintentionally create suffocation. They instill the sense that desire is conditional, that intimacy or attention is a reward for compliance, not a natural consequence of attraction. No one desires captivity. Desire seeks escape, liberation, and choice. When morality becomes a cage, it destroys both fantasy and fascination. These silent killers are cumulative. One misstep may be overlooked. Patterns are not. Predictable generosity, excessive talking, and moral imposition rarely arrive alone. They cluster, quietly eroding the dynamic of seduction, making the previously alluring figure unremarkable, heavy, or even oppressive. The very traits that once attracted become the instruments of withdrawal. Ironically, these killers are often disguised as virtues. Generosity is praised. Eloquence is admired. Morality is respected. The untrained seducer believes that their behavior enhances allure. In reality, it neutralizes it. The mind unconsciously withdraws. The heart cools. Desire is silently strangled by the weight of familiarity, verbosity, and judgment. The antidote is restraint. Generosity must be selective, sparing, and enigmatic. Speech must be measured, weighted, and spaced with silence. Moral perspective must be subtle, implicit, and embodied, never imposed or proclaimed. The seducer must cultivate absence as deliberately as presence, the unseen as intentionally as the visible. Every interaction is a test of subtlety. The most effective seduction relies on calibrated unpredictability. A generous act at the wrong time, a flood of words, or an imposed moral position destroys the delicate rhythm. Rhythm is seduction's heartbeat. Without it, engagement fades. Without engagement, desire collapses. Consider the genius of the silent killer, the charm that becomes suffocating, the generosity that becomes dull, the ethics that become rigid. Each one seems benign, even admirable. But collectively, they destroy what the seducer labored to create. Power erodes without spectacle. Attraction dissolves without awareness. And the target leaves, often without realizing why, leaving the seducer perplexed, frustrated, and blind to the invisible collapse they engineered. A truly magnetic individual understands the danger. They recognize that seduction is as much about restraint as action. Every word, every gesture, every ethical nuance carries weight. Presence must alternate with absence. Speech must oscillate with silence. Morality must guide, not dictate. Generosity must entice, not guarantee. Seduction is invisible architecture. Every movement, every pause, every withholding constructs or demolishes it. Silent killers do not announce themselves. They simply undermine the structure until the spell evaporates. Mastering seduction is, in part, mastering avoidance. Avoid predictability. Avoid verbosity. Avoid judgmental rigidity. These are the silent assassins, the killers that operate in the shadow. Power survives only when these killers are neutralized. Desire thrives only when mystery, restraint, and freedom are preserved. And when ignored, these quiet killers ensure that no matter how brilliant, attractive, or charismatic you may be, fascination fades slowly, invisibly, unforgivingly. The lesson is simple, but ignored at peril. Sometimes the most dangerous predators in the game of desire are the ones who appear most virtuous. Silent killers are patient, consistent, and unrelenting, just like time. And time always wins. Chapter 9. The Seductive Void. No one desires you for yourself. They desire the emptiness you fill, the fantasies you awaken, and the longing you embody. Desire is rarely aimed at the flesh or the presence before us. It is a projection. People are drawn not to reality, but to what they imagine, what they feel is missing in their lives. The most potent seduction exploits this void, this gap between fulfillment and longing. To seduce is to occupy a space that no one else has dared to enter, the shadow of unmet needs, unspoken fantasies, and invisible desires. At the heart of seduction lies the recognition that humans are perpetually incomplete. They chase excitement, validation, adventure, intimacy, and meaning, yet they seldom encounter it fully. The void is where seduction begins, in the absence, the unfulfilled, the unacknowledged. Those who are attuned to this void wield a power far greater than beauty, wealth, or charm alone. They manipulate longing itself. The seductive individual never competes with reality. They compete with absence. They enter spaces where satisfaction failed, and position themselves as the solution, the catalyst, the vessel of imagined possibility. The target does not desire you for what you are. They desire what you allow them to experience in the gap between want and fulfillment. Understanding emotional lack is the key to this strategy. Every human carries hidden deficiencies: the loss of love in childhood, the betrayal of past relationships, the disillusionment of unmet dreams. These deficiencies are invisible yet acute. They shape perception, guide behavior, and define attraction. A skilled seducer does not approach the target's surface desires. They enter the subterranean tunnels of longing, tracing paths back to what has been denied or unattainable. This entry into absence requires acute perception. Observation is more important than action. Listening is more important than speaking. Every hesitation, glance, or sigh from the target is a clue, a door into their private unfulfilled world. Seduction begins with mapping the void, identifying the emotional gaps, and recognizing the fantasies left incomplete. A common mistake is assuming that desire is generated by presence alone. It is not. Desire is the product of contrast, the pull between what exists and what is missing. The seducer must amplify this contrast, highlighting the ordinary as inadequate, while presenting themselves as the conduit to fulfillment. This amplification is subtle, never overt. To force the void is to destroy it. True seduction allows the target to perceive absence and imagine completion, while you remain enigmatic, partly revealed, partly imagined. Consider the ways this manifests. A glance held slightly longer than expected, a conversation that leaves questions unanswered, a gesture that suggests depth beyond what is spoken. These are not manipulations of the moment. They are invitations to inhabit the void, to step into longing, to project desire onto you. People are drawn to what they cannot fully comprehend, the unexplained, the ungraspable, the absent. The seductive void thrives on ambiguity. It requires restraint, timing, and precision. Too much visibility destroys mystery. Too little renders the seducer irrelevant. The art is in the balance, appearing enough to be noticed, yet distant enough to be desired. To fill a void, one must remain partially absent. Humans unconsciously seek to fill gaps. The seducer becomes a mirror of what they imagine, the lost passion, the excitement of youth, the adventure never pursued. But seduction is never complete. It must remain slightly out of reach. Completion kills fascination. Satisfaction extinguishes the fire. The void must be perpetually perceived, and only the seductive individual can maintain the illusion of possibility without closure. Seduction begins where fulfillment failed. Where love was withheld, the seducer appears generous. Where adventure was denied, the seducer embodies freedom. Where attention was absent, the seducer offers subtle focus. The void is not created by the seducer. It pre-exists in every human heart. The seducer simply navigates it, mapping its contours, exploiting its depth, and positioning themselves as the bridge between emptiness and imagined fulfillment. This understanding of human longing demands patience and cunning. The seducer cannot act on every whim or every insight. They must let the void linger, allow tension to build, and resist the urge to fill it too soon. People are drawn to tension, not resolution. They crave the experience of chasing, imagining, and hoping. The seductive void is a stage where fantasy plays out before reality arrives. Awareness of this dynamic also protects the seducer. Those who understand voids recognize the subtle signs of projection, manipulation, and obsession. They maintain control over their own presence and do not mistake the attention they receive for genuine attachment. The void attracts, it does not bind. Only by remaining aware can the seducer navigate this landscape without becoming lost themselves. There is danger in this work. The seductive void is a mirror. As you map the lack in others, you may encounter your own. Emotional gaps are universal. The seducer must remain disciplined, aware, and self-contained. Exploiting longing in others does not require surrendering to it yourself. Failure to maintain this boundary leads to collapse. The void can consume the seducer as easily as the target. The seducer understands that people desire symbols, not substance. They desire what you represent: freedom, passion, intensity, mystery, escape. They are drawn to the reflection of their own longing. This is why conventional attractiveness alone cannot achieve true seduction. Beauty, intelligence, or wealth are irrelevant if they do not interface with the void. Only those who interact with the unmet, the missing, and the imagined become unforgettable. Seduction is therefore a form of architecture, the architecture of absence. Each action, gesture, and word constructs pathways into the emotional void. The seducer's task is to guide the target into their own yearning, allowing them to experience desire as an extension of imagination, hope, and need. To seduce is to become indispensable in absence, irreplaceable in longing, and unforgettable in the imagination. Every seduction is born from a lack. Every desire is ignited by absence. Those who fail to recognize this will forever mistake attention for attachment, interest for intimacy, and proximity for power. The seductive void is the truth behind all attraction. People do not desire you. They desire what you allow them to feel, to imagine, and to project. Master this, and you move beyond charm, beauty, and superficial connection. You move into the realm where desire itself becomes your domain. You do not simply attract attention. You become the embodiment of longing, the keeper of absence, and the architect of fantasies. And the seducer knows that the void must never be filled. Only maintained, only curated, only exploited with precision, patience, and dark artistry. Because in the space where fulfillment failed, fascination lives. And in fascination, power endures. Chapter 10. Fantasy Escape and Psychological Hunger. People do not fall for you. They fall for the illusions you conjure, the worlds you make them inhabit, and the emptiness you promise to fill. Humans are perpetually dissatisfied. They yearn for something beyond their grasp. A life not lived, a passion unconsummated, a story untold. This psychological hunger is the gateway to seduction. Desire is rarely grounded in reality. It is rooted in fantasy, in the escape from the mundane, in the yearning for significance. Those who understand this hunger do not merely attract. They become the embodiment of longing, a living mirage that seduces through absence, imagination, and projection. Nostalgia is one of the most potent tools in this arsenal. People are drawn to echoes of their past, to memories tinged with longing and regret. The seducer who invokes nostalgia does not simply remind someone of what was. They allow them to relive the best versions of themselves, the moments of innocence, adventure, and wonder that have long faded. By reflecting this lost ideal, the seducer becomes a bridge to the impossible, a doorway back to a world the target secretly longs to reclaim. But nostalgia is more than memory. It is desire masquerading as remembrance. The seducer manipulates it with subtlety, evoking feelings that are almost forbidden in their intensity. The warmth of unfulfilled love, the thrill of a risk once taken, the purity of a time unburdened by consequence. People do not merely seek you. They seek the restoration of their lost selves, and you are the instrument of that restoration. Escape is the natural companion to nostalgia. Humans are trapped in routines, obligations, and invisible chains of expectation. Seduction offers liberation, not from reality itself, but from the mind's perception of it. To be seductive is to become the promise of freedom, the illusion that life could be different, more vibrant, more intense, and more meaningful. This freedom is never literal. It is psychological. It is the perception of agency, the possibility of transgression, the taste of a life unrestrained. The seductive individual understands that freedom is an illusion, yet illusions are infinitely more powerful than reality in matters of desire. To offer freedom is to offer hope, possibility, and the intoxicating sense of choice. And yet, true mastery lies in maintaining control while allowing the target to feel liberated. Every boundary, every constraint, every subtle limitation strengthens fascination by creating a tension between desire and accessibility. People crave what seems just beyond their reach. They long for the space they cannot inhabit and the life they cannot possess, and the seducer resides precisely there. Psychological hunger is further intensified through worship and obsession. People are not drawn merely to attention. They are drawn to reverence, to the sense that someone or something exists beyond themselves, a force that promises meaning, excitement, or transcendence. The seducer cultivates this hunger by presenting themselves as larger than life, enigmatic and unattainable, creating a dynamic where fascination transforms into devotion. Obsession is a dangerous currency. It arises not from what is given, but from what is withheld. The seducer allows glimpses of fulfillment. A touch, a look, a word, but never the entirety. This partial revelation triggers the imagination, stirs longing, and amplifies desire. The mind becomes occupied, preoccupied, and dependent on the seducer's presence. The hunger becomes a lens through which the target interprets all interactions, a filter that intensifies every nuance and gesture. Nostalgia, escape, and psychological hunger converge to create a potent triad of seduction. Each element feeds the other. Nostalgia deepens desire by exposing what was lost. Escape intensifies it by offering liberation from constraints. Psychological hunger magnifies it by transforming longing into obsession. The seducer does not merely exist in this space. They orchestrate it, choreographing emotional currents with the precision of a composer guiding a symphony. The skilled seducer understands that the human mind craves narrative, meaning, and projection. They offer all three, without ever fully satisfying the target. The target is drawn to the promise, not the fulfillment. Desire is sustained, not by completion, but by anticipation, by the endless replay of imagined moments, by the perpetual hope of a life unbounded and intensely felt. This mastery requires awareness and control. One must constantly observe the subtle responses of the target, the quickening of breath, the prolonged glance, the hesitation before a word, and adjust behavior to sustain fascination. Overindulgence, overexposure, or predictability destroys the illusion. The seducer must calibrate presence and absence, affirmation and ambiguity, pleasure and frustration. They must remain just enough of a mystery to be desired, just enough of an ideal to be worshipped. Seduction is ultimately about the human need for meaning. People long to feel seen, understood, and essential. They seek experiences that validate their existence and elevate their perception of life itself. The seductive individual becomes a mirror, reflecting not reality but an enhanced, more thrilling, more significant version of life, one the target cannot resist inhabiting. It is in this interplay of fantasy, escape, and hunger that the power of seduction truly resides. The seducer is not simply desired. They are mythologized, a living embodiment of what the target most craves but cannot fully grasp. They are the answer to unspoken questions, the fulfillment of unacknowledged yearnings, and the orchestrator of emotional landscapes. Yet this power carries risk. The seducer must navigate it carefully, avoiding the collapse of illusion into reality, of worship into entitlement, of obsession into suffocation. Maintaining the delicate balance between accessibility and distance, revelation and mystery, indulgence and restraint is the mark of mastery. In the end, fantasy, escape, and psychological hunger are the engines of attraction. They are invisible, relentless, and far more powerful than beauty, charm, or intellect alone. Those who command them wield influence not by coercion, but by becoming indispensable to desire itself. The most dangerous seducers are those who understand this truth. People do not seek you. They seek the worlds you conjure, the liberation you promise, and the hunger you stoke. And in those worlds, the seducer reigns supreme, untouchable, unforgettable, and profoundly intoxicating. Desire is never for what is. It is always for what could be, and the seducer exists precisely in that space. The infinite, ever-shifting terrain between longing and fulfillment, fantasy and reality, hunger and obsession. Chapter 11. Vulnerability is a seductive gateway. The weakest moments of others are your most powerful weapons, but only if you recognize their silent invitation. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is a threshold. It is the space where the defenses fall away, where control is surrendered, and where the human psyche becomes most permeable. To the untrained eye, moments of crisis, transition, or emotional instability are disasters. To the master of seduction, they are opportunities. Gateways into the hidden recesses of desire, longing, and psychological dependence. The art lies in understanding that people unconsciously signal when they are open, and these signals, fleeting and fragile, are the invitations the seducer must recognize and exploit. Crisis transforms ordinary individuals into fertile ground for influence. A heartbreak, a career collapse, a sudden life change, each ruptures the protective walls built around the psyche. In these moments, clarity fades and longing intensifies. People seek anchors, beacons, and solutions they cannot consciously name. A seducer enters, not as a savior, but as a mirror, a reflection of possibilities, a subtle presence that reassures and entices simultaneously. Vulnerability is the language of unguarded hearts, and those fluent in it can navigate its depths with unmatched precision. During transitions, the mind is both fragile and restless. Life's predictable patterns have been disrupted, leaving individuals suspended in uncertainty. This liminal state is intoxicating for a seducer. Targets oscillate between hope and fear, past and future, what they desire and what they believe they deserve. Each oscillation exposes a point of entry, a subtle crack in their psychological armor. Observing without overt intrusion, guiding without apparent control, and offering glimpses of stability without cementing attachment. These are the hallmarks of exploiting vulnerability without destroying it. Emotional instability amplifies the potency of seduction. People who experience swings of mood, longing, or despair are emotionally heightened and acutely aware of relief, comfort, and affirmation. The seducer positions themselves as both witness and participant, validating emotions while simultaneously stirring curiosity. The presence of someone who seems attuned, non-judgmental yet enigmatic, creates a gravitational pull that is impossible to resist. Vulnerability, when acknowledged subtly, generates dependence, longing, and the illusion of intimacy. The seducer does not rush to fill the void or repair the fracture. Doing so would break the spell. Instead, they enter gently, almost imperceptibly, and allow the target to reveal more of themselves through instinct and unconscious desire. Every confession, every tremor of insecurity, every fleeting glance of need is a signal, a silent key to psychological access. The seducer amplifies these openings without pushing too far, creating a delicate tension that magnifies the target's investment and deepens the fascination. Broken moments are inherently seductive. They expose contradictions, strength intertwined with fragility, pride with longing, independence with dependence. The seducer recognizes that attraction is not born of perfection but of contrast. Someone too complete, too composed, too self-contained offers nothing to aspire to or project upon. Vulnerability creates projection. It allows the target to imagine, hope, and desire, all while the seducer remains the enigmatic presence guiding the narrative. Turning weakness into psychological access requires subtlety. The seducer mirrors, amplifies, and reflects without overtly exploiting. A sigh of despair may be met with calm understanding. A quiver of doubt may be met with steady presence. In these exchanges, the seducer becomes indispensable, not through manipulation alone, but by embodying a space of safety, fascination, and unfulfilled longing. The target begins to associate the seducer with relief, possibility, and emotional resonance, and this association is far more binding than mere charm. Yet vulnerability is a double-edged sword. A misstep can collapse trust, shatter intrigue, or provoke retreat. The seducer must remain acutely aware of balance, close enough to engage, distant enough to maintain desire, responsive enough to validate, restrained enough to sustain tension. The dance is intricate, requiring intuition, timing, and awareness of unspoken cues. A skilled seducer knows when to lean into the fracture and when to retreat, allowing the target to spiral slightly before offering glimpses of understanding. Crisis, transition, and instability also illuminate deeper desires and hidden fears. A seducer learns not just what a target says, but what they cannot say. The gaps between words, the hesitations in gaze, and the subtle shifts in posture reveal the true landscape of longing. Vulnerability is the map, and the seducer's insight is the compass. Each discovered fissure represents a new pathway to influence, an uncharted emotional territory where fascination can grow and obsession can root. The gateway of vulnerability also exposes the target to projection. They invest meaning in the seducer, attributing qualities they need, fantasizing outcomes they secretly crave, and seeking fulfillment for needs they cannot fully articulate. The seducer becomes simultaneously real and imagined, present and absent, known and unknowable, the embodiment of the emotional resonance that fills their internal void. In this space, desire becomes layered, consuming, and deeply personal. Ultimately, vulnerability is not a tool in isolation, but a lens through which all seduction is amplified. It is the contrast to strength, the invitation to explore, the signal of openness that transforms ordinary attraction into psychological dominance. Those who master the recognition and navigation of broken moments wield power without force, influence without coercion, and fascination without revelation. To enter someone's vulnerability is to enter their most secret world. It demands patience, subtlety, and precision. Every word, gesture, and absence must be calculated to maintain intrigue while offering solace. It is a paradoxical mastery, appearing both accessible and untouchable, empathic and elusive, present and yet a projection. The seducer thrives in this paradox, moving through weakness not as a predator in obvious pursuit, but as an architect of desire, mapping fractures and guiding them into obsession. The seducer who understands vulnerability knows that desire is often strongest when the heart is exposed. The target's brokenness becomes a canvas, and the seducer the brush that paints longing, hope, and fascination in subtle, irresistible strokes. Weakness becomes entry, despair becomes desire, and crisis becomes a bridge to control. In this dark art, vulnerability is not merely a moment, it is a gateway, a threshold into the deepest recesses of longing and psychological influence. To those who can recognize and navigate it, the power it grants is absolute. The ability to captivate, enthrall, and command the attention of those most ripe for seduction. The gateway of vulnerability is always open to the observant. Those who walk through it step into a world where desire is sculpted from fragility, and power is drawn not from force, but from subtle, merciless insight. And in that world, the seducer reigns, invisible yet indispensable, untouchable yet unforgettable. Chapter 12, Phase 1. Awakening Seductive Desire. The first spark of desire is not found in proximity, but in absence, and in the silent chaos you plant in the mind. Seduction begins not with words, touch, or overt displays, but with disruption. Humans are creatures of habit, bound to routines, anchored in familiarity, and comforted by predictability. To awaken desire, the seducer must first unseat this stability, even the most subtle disturbance. A glance that lingers too long, a conversation that hints at unknown depths, a presence that is felt more than seen, begins to stir the mind and fracture complacency. The target, unaware of the invisible currents shifting around them, begins to notice what they had ignored, to feel what they had taken for granted, and to long for what they cannot define. Routine is a seducer's enemy, but also its canvas. By carefully observing the patterns, behaviors, and comforts of the target, The seducer identifies the fissures in monotony where curiosity can take root. It is never about destruction for its own sake. It is about crafting tension, anticipation, and the subtle suggestion that life, or at least life with the seducer, could be different. A disruption must be barely perceptible, like a tremor beneath calm waters, enough to shift attention without alarming, enough to provoke intrigue without forcing engagement. Absence is the ultimate catalyst in this phase. Humans rarely recognize the value of presence until it is fleeting. By creating controlled absence, the seducer transforms themselves into an enigma, a phantom that haunts the target's consciousness. Every disappearance, every delay, every unanticipated withdrawal fuels speculation, longing, and imagination. Absence magnifies value. It converts the mundane into the extraordinary. The target begins to fill the void with projections, fantasies, and desires they may never consciously acknowledge. In this absence, the seducer is omnipresent, invisible yet dominating the mental landscape. Curiosity is the lifeblood of Phase 1. It is cultivated not through revelation, but through suggestion. Words must hint, gestures must imply, and moments of interaction must leave questions unasked and answers incomplete. The target is drawn forward by what they cannot fully grasp, by the gaps that demand exploration. A seducer understands that desire is amplified by the unknown, that fascination is fed by ambiguity, and that power lies in the ability to remain just beyond comprehension. This phase requires subtlety in every movement. Attention must be visible yet never fully given. Interest must be hinted but never declared. The seducer is a master of balance, offering fragments of engagement that tease the imagination while withholding resolution. In this delicate dance, the target becomes an active participant, compelled to invest in the pursuit, creating desire without ever realizing the hand guiding them. The seducer also manipulates perception. Small inconsistencies, fleeting contradictions, and carefully timed absences suggest depth, intrigue, and hidden dimensions. The target interprets these signals through the lens of their own longing, projecting significance where none may objectively exist. This is the genius of Phase 1. The seducer's power grows not from force, but from the target's own imagination, which the seducer artfully provokes. It is essential that the target never feel coerced. Desire forced is fleeting. Curiosity imposed is resented. The seducer creates the illusion of agency, allowing the target to believe they are the architect of their own fascination. By seeming partially elusive, the seducer encourages pursuit without confrontation. The mind, once engaged, becomes an instrument of its own undoing, obsessing, hypothesizing, and longing in ways that the seducer carefully orchestrates yet never overtly controls. Timing is critical. A misstep, appearing too frequently, revealing too much, or breaking the rhythm of absence can destroy intrigue and collapse desire. Conversely, the precise calibration of presence and absence transforms ordinary interactions into psychological events, where every glance, word, or gesture becomes laden with meaning. The seducer learns to manipulate anticipation, to measure the effect of each action and to adjust subtly, maintaining an unbroken tension that captivates attention and sparks longing. Phase 1 is also the foundation for all subsequent phases. The target, once mentally and emotionally disturbed, becomes receptive to deeper forms of influence. Desire, curiosity, and fascination set the stage for more profound seduction, where emotional and psychological access will be sought and granted. But without this initial awakening, later efforts collapse into emptiness, for the mind must first be stirred before it can be guided, and the imagination must be engaged before obsession can form. Observation and intelligence are indispensable in this phase. Every subtle shift in gaze, every slight hesitation in tone, every microexpression must be noted and interpreted. The seducer must understand what piques interest, what triggers reflection, and what provokes longing. The most powerful seducers are those who can read invisible signals, anticipate responses, and adjust their behavior to cultivate ever-deepening desire without revealing their own full intentions. Phase 1 is not about gratification. It is about tension, the slow accumulation of mental and emotional pressure that transforms the target's thoughts into a landscape of longing. The seducer plants seeds without harvesting them, allowing curiosity to fester, imagination to flourish, and desire to become self-sustaining. Each absence, hint, and subtle engagement strengthens the invisible bonds that tie the target's attention and fascination to the seducer. Ultimately, the first phase of seduction is a game of shadows. It thrives in uncertainty, ambiguity, and projection. The seducer's power lies in invisibility made tangible through psychological disruption, absence, and the artful cultivation of curiosity. The target, drawn by forces they cannot name, begins to desire not only the seducer's presence, but the world's fantasies and possibilities the seducer represents. In phase 1, the mind becomes a hunting ground. Curiosity is sparked, longing begins to stir, and desire awakens silently and visibly yet irresistibly. The seducer is both the cause and the observer of this awakening, orchestrating the dance of absence and presence, suggestion and ambiguity, until the target's imagination has ensnared them completely. Desire is rarely awakened by fulfillment. It is sparked by absence, uncertainty, and subtle disruption. The most dangerous seducers understand this truth. They do not chase desire, they create it. They do not offer answers, they provoke questions. And in the shadowed spaces between interaction and withdrawal, the target's mind becomes their playground, a landscape of longing, obsession, and fascination from which there is no easy escape. Chapter 13. Phase 2. Leading the target astray. To lead someone astray is to enter their mind as both guide and chaos. One misstep and the spell shatters. Phase 2 is the labyrinth. It is the stage where fascination begins to entangle the mind, where curiosity blooms into craving, and where desire teeters between attraction and obsession. The seducer now moves beyond mere intrigue, venturing into the delicate art of controlled disorientation. Words, gestures, and presence are no longer neutral. They become intoxicants, subtle weapons, and instruments of psychological orchestration. The target, already primed from phase 1, is now susceptible to shifts, delays, and contradictions that deepen attachment while amplifying intrigue. Words in this phase are not merely communication. They are catalysts. A carefully placed phrase can ignite fantasy, provoke longing, or unsettle certainty. The seducer learns to speak in riddles and hints, leaving meaning dangling like a suspended jewel for the target to grasp. Every compliment, every tease, every suggestion carries double weight. It conveys interest while sustaining ambiguity, projecting availability while ensuring unattainability. Language becomes an invisible architecture, shaping perception, stirring imagination, and planting seeds that will grow into emotional dependence. Distance is the silent accomplice of words. By strategically withdrawing, by creating moments of absence after engagement, the seducer amplifies desire. The target, accustomed to intermittent interaction, begins to interpret absence as significance. Every pause, every unreturned glance, every delayed response becomes a mirror for their longing. Absence magnifies value, it inflates perception. The seducer understands that desire is rarely sustained by proximity. It is cultivated in the mind, nurtured in speculation, and intensified by anticipation. Delay and unpredictability heighten this effect. The seducer does not operate on a predictable schedule. Engagement is sporadic, attention selective, and responsiveness uneven. This controlled irregularity destabilizes the target's emotional equilibrium. They begin to wonder, to analyze, to imagine, all mental energy directed toward the seducer. Uncertainty, far from being an obstacle, becomes the engine of attraction. Humans crave patterns, yet they are compelled by those who defy predictability while remaining magnetic. The seducer, master of this paradox, orchestrates their presence and absence with precision, ensuring the target is drawn ever deeper into the orbit of fascination. Phase 2 thrives on emotional disorientation. The seducer alternates warmth and coldness, intimacy and distance, engagement and detachment. Each shift is subtle, yet cumulatively profound. The target experiences a pendulum of feelings, excitement, longing, confusion, hope, and frustration, creating a heightened state of emotional receptivity. In this state, the mind is vulnerable, imagination dominates, and perception becomes malleable. The seducer, ever observant, uses these fluctuations to steer desire, to shape fantasy, and to solidify fascination without overt manipulation. Controlled confusion is both art and science. The seducer must balance chaos with guidance, tension with release, and unpredictability with subtle coherence. Too much disorientation collapses trust, too little diminishes intrigue. The goal is to craft a psychological landscape where the target constantly questions, wonders, and imagines. A world in which the seducer occupies both center and periphery, visible yet elusive, comprehensible yet mysterious. In this careful imbalance, obsession quietly takes root. Gifts, gestures, and small attentions are strategically deployed in this phase. Each act must feel spontaneous, yet carefully calculated. A thoughtful word, a fleeting compliment, a minor concession, all serve to reinforce the seducer's presence while maintaining the illusion of unpredictability. Even silence becomes a tool. The absence of communication can provoke reflection, doubt, or yearning, all of which draw the target deeper into emotional investment. Every action and inaction is meticulously orchestrated to sustain fascination. The seducer also manipulates perception of control. By giving the target the illusion of understanding, insight, or influence, the seducer paradoxically increases attachment. The target believes they are deciphering the seducer, yet every step is guided by the seducer's subtle architecture. The mind seeking coherence invests more energy in pursuit, further entrenching desire. Here, seduction is not coercion, it is orchestration, a quiet domination of attention and thought. Phase 2 is a crucible of fantasy. The target projects their desires onto the seducer, filling gaps of knowledge with imagined intentions, qualities, and experiences. The seducer, skilled in ambiguity, allows these projections to flourish, subtly guiding them without confirmation or denial. The target's longing grows not from reality, but from the imagined, the anticipated, and the unfulfilled. Each carefully timed contradiction or hint reinforces the allure, maintaining tension while deepening emotional entanglement. Timing and rhythm remain essential. The seducer must calibrate every interaction, the length of absence, the tone of engagement, the intensity of attention. Each choice affects the target's perception of value, intrigue, and desire. Too frequent and fascination wanes, too sparse, and the connection weakens. Mastery of Phase 2 lies in this precise balance, the ability to navigate desire as both artist and strategist, maintaining emotional suspense while gradually drawing the target closer. Ultimately, leading someone astray is about guiding the mind into a maze of attraction without revealing the exits. The target becomes complicit in their own entanglement, chasing illusions carefully curated by the seducer. Emotional disorientation, controlled absence, and subtle contradiction transform fascination into dependency, curiosity into obsession. The seducer's power lies not in force, but in shaping perception, steering imagination, and orchestrating the psychological landscape of desire. Phase 2 is a dangerous but irresistible stage. It demands patience, foresight, and an intimate understanding of human longing. Every word, every pause, every nuance contributes to the architecture of attraction. The target, caught in a delicate web of suggestion, absence, and emotional flux, cannot help but follow, enthralled by the seducer's invisible hand. And in this phase, the seducer learns the ultimate truth. Fascination is not granted. It is carefully engineered, nurtured in shadows, and sustained by the artful manipulation of perception, desire, and uncertainty. To master Phase 2 is to become both guide and enigma, orchestrating desire while remaining untouchable, shaping obsession while eluding comprehension. It is the art of controlled chaos, the seductive maze in which the mind becomes the playground of longing and the seducer the unseen architect of fascination. In this phase, the target is no longer merely interested. They are captivated, disoriented, and willingly ensnared, unable to resist the pull of the psychological web woven around them. Chapter 14, Phase 3, Setting the Seductive Trap. To enter Phase 3 is to step into the mind's hidden corridors, where hope and despair collide, and control slips into the hands of the unseen. Phase 3 is the crucible of seduction. By now, the target has been disoriented, intrigued, and primed by absence, suggestion, and curiosity. Their thoughts dwell upon the seducer, imagination flourishes unchecked, and desire grows restless, insistent, and insidious. It is here, in the delicate architecture of anticipation and longing, that the seducer moves beyond mere fascination and begins to weave the trap. Subtle, psychological, and inescapable. The most potent tool in this phase is emotional leverage. Hope and despair are not just feelings. They are engines of dependency. The seducer alternates between warmth and withdrawal, attention and distance, affirmation and ambiguity. Each oscillation creates tension, uncertainty, and anticipation. The target, caught in the ebb and flow, becomes acutely attuned to every signal, every word, every gesture. The mind, desperate for clarity, invests further in pursuit, seeking resolution, yet continuously frustrated. In this tension, fascination evolves into psychological attachment. Childhood regression is a shadowy strategy employed here. Humans unconsciously long for the simplicity, safety, and unconditional attention of their early years. By subtly eliciting this regression, the seducer awakens dependency. Through acts of perceived care, protection, or guidance, the target begins to associate the seducer with emotional security, a figure capable of fulfilling needs unmet since youth. This is not tenderness and innocence. It is the cultivation of reliance, a deepening of emotional stakes that binds the target's psyche to the seducer's influence. Every conversation, every shared secret, every act of subtle validation is a psychological anchor, tethering the target ever closer to the seducer. Transgression and taboo amplify the intensity of this phase. Forbidden pleasures, whispered secrets, and the allure of crossing boundaries evoke primal fascination. The target is drawn to danger, excitement, and the thrill of experiencing the forbidden through the seducer's carefully orchestrated invitations. Moral and societal boundaries are not simply ignored. They are reframed as gateways to extraordinary experiences, enhancing the target's sense of wonder, arousal, and dependency. The seducer becomes both guide and gatekeeper, the architect of experiences that tantalize, challenge, and enthrall. In Phase 3, the seducer manipulates perception with finesse. Emotional highs and lows are meticulously calibrated. Moments of warmth, attention, or intimacy are counterbalanced by deliberate distance, silence, or ambiguity. The target learns to chase the fleeting moments of connection, to anticipate the subtle gestures that signal approval, and to crave the attention that seems scarce yet vital. Every interaction becomes a psychological transaction, where desire is heightened by restraint, and attachment is deepened by carefully measured unpredictability. The seducer's presence becomes simultaneously comforting and intoxicating. By evoking childhood longing, offering glimpses of forbidden experiences, and balancing tension with fleeting pleasure, the target is guided into a state of heightened emotional sensitivity. In this state, desire is no longer mere longing. It is dependency, fascination, and a compulsion to engage. The mind and body are enmeshed, creating an intricate tapestry of attachment that is difficult to unravel. Phase 3 also requires mastery of subtlety. Direct expression of desire, coercion, or overt manipulation destroys illusion. The seducer operates in suggestion, implication, and carefully controlled engagement. Words are layered with meaning, gestures charged with unspoken promise, and attention allocated with precision. Every action is a signal, every pause a punctuation mark, every interaction an invitation to deeper investment. The target, while conscious of their desire, perceives themselves as the author of pursuit, while in reality, the seducer orchestrates every movement within the trap. Here, obsession begins to crystallize. The target internalizes the seducer's presence, projecting fantasies and expectations onto them, while the seducer maintains an aura of partial inaccessibility. Hope that the seducer will provide attention, intimacy, or connection is tantalizingly close yet never fully realized. Despair, delays, absences, or ambiguity keeps the mind restless, craving, and primed for further engagement. The interplay of hope and despair transforms fascination into compulsion. Even mundane interactions are leveraged in Phase 3. Shared meals, casual conversations, or brief encounters become stages for subtle psychological influence. Attention to detail, perception of empathy, and gentle, controlled provocations reinforce the seducer's presence while cultivating longing. The seducer becomes the lens through which the target experiences excitement, curiosity, and desire. Every element of ordinary life is infused with significance by proximity, implication, and the careful orchestration of emotional stakes. Physical presence, though still secondary, begins to carry weight. Glances, proximity, touch, and subtle gestures are calibrated to reinforce emotional attachment. They serve as reminders of connection and as catalysts for further longing. In Phase 3, physicality is not the climax. It is the reinforcement, a tactile punctuation mark in a narrative largely written in psychological and emotional strokes. Ultimately, Phase 3 is about establishing irreversible entanglement. The target's emotional landscape is mapped and leveraged. Their imagination and longing are entwined with the seducer's presence. The trap is invisible yet inescapable. Dependency, desire, and fascination fuse to create a state where the target cannot disengage without significant emotional cost. The seducer has not merely attracted attention. They have anchored themselves in the psyche, shaping thoughts, feelings, and expectations to sustain ongoing attachment. The seducer in this phase is both architect and observer. Every subtle shift in emotion, every flicker of longing, every nuance of dependence is noted and guided. Hope and despair, pleasure and frustration, access and withdrawal, all are manipulated to ensure the target remains captivated, emotionally unbalanced, and irresistibly drawn. This is the power of Phase 3. The seducer does not merely win desire. They engineer a psychological dependency, a labyrinth of fascination from which the target cannot easily escape. Phase 3 is perilous but intoxicating. To master it is to understand the human psyche's most fragile points: longing, fear, memory, and forbidden desire. To navigate it successfully requires patience, subtlety, and the unwavering ability to observe, adapt, and manipulate without detection. The seducer becomes the silent puppet master, and the target, entangled in emotional threads woven with precision, moves as if by choice, yet is quietly entrapped in the seducer's invisible web. In this phase, the mind is the battlefield, desire the weapon, and emotional dependency the victory. Those who grasp Phase 3 understand that true seduction is not instant gratification, but the slow, deliberate construction of a psychological and emotional trap, one that ensures the target is not only fascinated, but irrevocably ensnared. Chapter 15. Phase 4, the final seductive move. Phase 4 is the knife's edge of desire. One misstep, one hesitation, and the spell shatters forever. Phase 4 is the culmination of months of strategy, observation, and subtle manipulation. It is where psychological seduction transforms into the visceral, where the mind's fascination meets the body's primal longing, and where the seducer's influence reaches its apex. The target, already entangled in a web of curiosity, hope, despair, and obsession, is now fully poised to act, or to retreat. Every gesture, every pause, and every nuance of presence matters, for in this phase, hesitation can undo all that has been carefully cultivated. Withdrawal is a provocation. By retreating at precisely the right moment, the seducer amplifies desire, stirs longing, and activates the target's imagination. Absence is no longer neutral. It becomes a force compelling reflection, anticipation, and even anxiety. The target begins to replay every interaction, every word, every glance, searching for meaning and seeking the elusive return of attention. The seducer, master of timing, knows that scarcity intensifies craving. The more the target believes that access is limited, the more potent desire becomes. And withdrawal is not rejection. It is the artful creation of tension that primes the target for the ultimate engagement. Physical presence, when reintroduced, carries the weight of psychological preparation. The seducer's proximity, gaze, and subtle touch act as a conduit for previously accumulated longing, translating abstract fascination into concrete desire. Every movement is deliberate, every glance loaded with unspoken promise. The body becomes a language, a medium through which the seducer communicates potency, allure, and intent. The target experiences a convergence of emotional investment and primal instinct, where anticipation explodes into near irresistible attraction. This is the psychological climax, the moment where months of orchestration find expression in physical, visceral reality. Timing in this phase is everything. To act too early is to squander tension. To act too late is to break the spell. The seducer must sense the precise moment when the target's mind and body are most vulnerable to surrender. Hesitation is fatal. Even a subtle sign of doubt can shatter illusion, allowing the target to regain composure, objectivity, and emotional distance. The seducer's confidence must be absolute, their movements deliberate, and their presence unshakable. In this delicate balance, desire can either reach consummation or collapse entirely. Phase 4 also requires psychological calibration. The seducer must continue to guide perception while amplifying longing. Subtle cues, a lingering gaze, a soft word, a measured pause, communicate both availability and restraint. The target is aware of the seducer's attention, yet is perpetually uncertain of the full measure of access. This ambiguity fuels obsession, intensifies anticipation, and ensures that physical engagement is experienced as the apex of accumulated desire rather than a mere transaction. The seducer has not simply created attraction. They have engineered the psychological conditions that make surrender irresistible. In this final phase, the seducer also manages the interplay of control and surrender by allowing the target to feel as though they are choosing. The seducer preserves the illusion of autonomy, while fully directing the psychological and emotional narrative. The target believes themselves to be active participants. Yet each step, each response, and each emotional reaction has been carefully orchestrated. The seducer's mastery lies in invisibility. They control outcomes without apparent coercion, shaping desire into fulfillment with subtlety and precision. Sensory manipulation reaches its peak here. Touch, proximity, scent, tone of voice, and even the rhythm of interaction are calibrated to maximize emotional and physiological response. These sensory elements are inseparable from the psychological entanglement previously cultivated. Together, they create an overwhelming convergence of mind and body, fantasy and reality, longing and gratification. The target's focus narrows, obsession intensifies, and the seducer's presence becomes both irresistible and inescapable. Phase 4 is also about managing risk. The seducer must anticipate potential resistance, hesitation, or retreat. Emotional safety, timing, and subtle reassurance are woven into every gesture, allowing the target to surrender without fear, doubt, or second thoughts. Every movement communicates stability, confidence, and inevitability, while maintaining the thrill of the chase and the allure of unpredictability. The seducer is both anchor and storm, a paradox the target cannot resist. This is the apex of seduction, the convergence of psychological mastery, emotional investment, and physical presence. The target's desire, cultivated and manipulated over weeks or months, reaches fulfillment not simply as gratification, but as the apex of obsession, dependency, and fascination. The seducer has orchestrated every phase, every interaction, and every nuance to ensure this moment carries maximum psychological and emotional weight. Phase 4 is perilous because it is fleeting. Once consummation occurs, the dynamics shift. Desire may transform into satisfaction, obsession into reflection. The seducer must act decisively to preserve the spell, maintain intrigue, avoid overexposure, and manage withdrawal with precision. Success is not measured solely by physical conquest, but by the psychological aftermath, the lingering influence, the continued fascination, and the reinforcement of the seducer's presence in the target's mind. Ultimately, Phase 4 is the final test of mastery. It requires absolute confidence, acute psychological awareness, and precise timing. The seducer's power is fully realized when withdrawal, presence, suggestion, and sensory influence converge into a seamless experience that leaves the target entranced, invested, and unable to disentangle from the web carefully constructed over time. Hesitation, doubt, or miscalculation can undo everything. Decisiveness, subtlety, and timing ensure dominance. Phase 4 is not merely an act. It is the culmination of an invisible architecture, the apex of psychological manipulation, and the realization of desire as both art and strategy. Here, fascination becomes fulfillment, tension becomes release, and seduction achieves its ultimate expression. The seducer stands at the center of a carefully engineered emotional universe, where the target's mind, body, and desire converge into a state of complete and irreversible entanglement. This is the power of the final move. It is decisive, intoxicating, and absolute. It is the moment where psychological seduction becomes physical reality, where control is perfected, and where the seducer's mastery over desire is fully revealed. Hesitate even slightly, and the spell vanishes. Act with precision, and the target is irrevocably captivated. This is the apex, the final seductive act in a game where mastery of mind, emotion, and presence dictates destiny. Chapter 16. Sustaining seductive control. To believe that seduction ends with conquest is to surrender power before it is fully claimed. Seduction is not a moment, it is a continuum. Even after desire has been won, the work of the seducer continues. Those who believe the game concludes with initial success are quickly undone. The target, once enthralled, can become complacent or worse, detached. The seducer who wishes to maintain influence must understand that desire is fragile, fleeting, and endlessly negotiable. Tension is the currency of continued fascination. It is what transforms fleeting attention into lasting obsession. The first truth of sustaining seductive control is that unpredictability preserves power. Humans are drawn to what challenges them, what they cannot fully grasp, and what threatens to escape their understanding. If the seducer becomes fully predictable, if every gesture, every word, every movement is mapped and expected, the target's fascination diminishes. Curiosity fades, desire wanes, and the subtle psychological dependency that has been cultivated begins to erode. The seducer must therefore remain a paradox, present yet elusive, attentive yet occasionally distant, warm yet restrained, a living embodiment of contradiction. Instability is not chaos. It is a carefully orchestrated mechanism of influence. The target must experience emotional fluctuations that ensure continued engagement. Moments of intimacy, affirmation, or attention are interspersed with calculated absence, withdrawal, or ambiguity. This oscillation creates a psychological rhythm that the target internalizes, a pattern in which emotional highs are cherished and the lows are feared yet irresistibly endured. The seducer, through these fluctuations, maintains the target's attention while reinforcing dependence. Desire is most potent when it is not constant. Longing intensifies when satisfaction is neither guaranteed nor predictable. Even subtle cues become instruments of control. A glance that lingers, a message left unanswered for just the right interval, a touch that is fleeting rather than sustained. Each is a signal that maintains the tension necessary to keep the target invested. These microgestures convey significance and mystery, reinforcing the idea that the seducer exists as both a reward and a challenge, a presence that is sought, desired, and yet not fully possessed. The target, increasingly enmeshed in anticipation, begins to attribute meaning to every interaction, constructing psychological dependence from the seducer's subtle choreography. Emotional engagement is deepened by alternating vulnerability and dominance. The seducer allows glimpses of weakness or sincerity, permitting the target to feel protective or superior, only to reassert authority and control in ways that reestablish the balance of power. This interplay is delicate. The seducer must calibrate exposure to prevent pity while inviting emotional investment. When executed with precision, these fluctuations create a profound attachment, a sense that the seducer is essential not merely for pleasure or attention, but as the anchor of the target's emotional world. Long-term control also relies on the seducer's mastery of the target's desires and fears. These must be continually observed, mapped, and subtly manipulated. Interests shift, circumstances change, and new vulnerabilities emerge. The seducer must remain vigilant, adapting their approach to match the evolving psyche of the target. Emotional instability in the target, stress, uncertainty, or longing becomes an opportunity. By strategically offering comfort, excitement, or validation, the seducer ensures that the target's emotional equilibrium remains contingent upon their presence, reinforcing attachment while cultivating dependence. The environment itself can be leveraged to sustain control. Settings that evoke intimacy, danger, novelty, or beauty amplify emotional responsiveness. A shared trip, a secretive encounter, or an unexpected adventure can reignite fascination, drawing the target deeper into the seducer's sphere of influence. Even ordinary routines, when punctuated by subtle surprises or orchestrated tension, reinforce the seducer's significance in the target's daily life. The world becomes a stage, with every interaction a performance designed to perpetuate desire. Communication, though often understated, plays a critical role. Words are selected not merely to convey information, but to manipulate perception, evoke curiosity, and sustain engagement. Silence is equally powerful. The absence of communication can provoke longing, reflection, and a heightened awareness of the seducer's presence. Every interaction is part of a larger strategy, an ongoing dance in which the target is both participant and audience, continually reminded of the seducer's significance without ever achieving complete mastery over them. Psychological reinforcement is sustained through alternating rewards and denial. Praise, attention, or intimacy offered intermittently creates craving. Withdrawal, delay, or subtle challenge maintains tension. This rhythm conditions the target's responses, shaping desire into a compulsive, self-reinforcing cycle. The seducer becomes the axis around which the target's emotions rotate, a constant yet elusive source of validation, excitement, and longing. Phase 6, sustaining seductive control, requires vigilance and subtlety. The seducer must resist the temptation of overexposure, excessive reassurance, or predictability. They must balance engagement with withdrawal, affirmation with ambiguity, vulnerability with dominance. Only through this careful equilibrium can fascination persist, desire deepen, and psychological influence remain unbroken. The target, enmeshed in the cycle of tension and reward, becomes both obsessed and dependent, perpetually drawn to the seducer yet never fully satisfied, forever chasing what cannot be entirely possessed. Ultimately, seduction is an ongoing act, not a single conquest. Desire must be maintained, fascination cultivated, and emotional engagement continuously orchestrated. The seducer's mastery is proven not in initial conquest, but in the enduring ability to sustain psychological and emotional dominance, to convert attraction into dependency, and to transform desire into a perpetual, consuming force. Phase 6 is the apex of this mastery, a delicate, continuous, and invisible control over the human psyche, where the seducer's presence is always felt, never taken for granted, and desire is endlessly perpetuated. In the end, sustaining seductive control is the most profound test of skill. It is an exercise in patience, perception, and precision, where power is maintained not through force, but through the subtle orchestration of tension, emotional instability, and strategic ambiguity. The target remains captivated, longing, and irrevocably entangled, a testament to the seducer's enduring mastery over the mind, heart, and desire. Chapter 17. The Art of the Seductive Exit. Exiting is as potent as conquest. Mishandle it and all influence collapses into ashes. The true mastery of seduction is revealed not merely in capture but in release. Those who fail to exit with precision and elegance often destroy the very spell they spend months or even years crafting. The seducer's departure is not an end. It is a final act of power, a strategic withdrawal that preserves influence, maintains fascination, and ensures the target remains captivated long after physical absence. To leave improperly is to surrender control, to bleed desire into resentment, or worse, to obliterate the memory of enchantment entirely. Ending without collapse begins with psychological foresight. The seducer must anticipate the target's reaction, tempering the emotional fallout while maintaining mystery. Abrupt departures, uncontrolled revelations, or displays of vulnerability risk diminishing the allure cultivated so carefully. The seducer's exit must feel inevitable yet graceful, decisive yet enigmatic. The target should perceive absence not as rejection, but as the continuation of a narrative they cannot fully grasp, a story where the seducer remains omnipresent even when unseen. Disappearance preserves power because it transforms presence into memory, and memory into obsession. The mind struggles to let go of what it cannot access, and in this struggle, desire is amplified. The seducer becomes a phantom of longing, a shadow that lingers in the imagination, a symbol of what the target cannot possess, but cannot forget. Every moment of absence is an echo that reverberates through the target's thoughts, reinforcing fascination and ensuring that the seducer's influence endures. The less tangible the exit, the more potent the lingering effect. Timing is the invisible hand that guides the art of exit. To leave too early is to undercut the built tension, leaving the target unsatisfied, skeptical, or confused. To leave too late is to risk attachment, predictability, and emotional dilution. The seducer must gauge precisely when desire is at its zenith, when longing is desperate, yet still pure, untainted by overexposure or disappointment. This delicate calculation transforms disappearance into an instrument of lasting influence. The target is left craving what was, pondering what might have been, and constructing fantasies around what will never be fully regained. Words, gestures, and actions in the final moments are subtle yet profound. Farewells should be measured, leaving as little certainty as possible while implying significance. The seducer may offer a final gift of attention, a fleeting touch, or a carefully chosen phrase, all designed to reinforce memory and desire without collapsing the illusion. Silence, too, is a weapon. The absence of explanation, the withholding of emotional closure, and the refusal to reveal full intent heighten fascination and create a space in which the target projects their longing, imagining the seducer's motives, character, and desires in ways that perpetually glorify them. The art of exit also involves avoiding emotional contamination. Demonstrations of anger, regret, pleading, or moral justification erode power. They convert a carefully nurtured obsession into resentment or indifference. The seducer must maintain composure, aloofness, and dignity, leaving behind a sense of incompleteness rather than injury. The goal is not to wound, but to enchant, not to provoke bitterness, but to ensure the target's longing remains active, unresolved, and psychologically indebted to the memory of the seducer. Physical absence is amplified by psychological resonance. Through subtle reminders, memories, gifts, shared spaces, or mutual connections, the seducer continues to influence the target's inner world. Each recollection, triggered by scent, sound, or imagery, becomes a thread tying the target to the seducer's presence, a reminder of the emotional and sensory journey they experienced. The exit transforms from a simple departure into a lingering influence that manipulates perception, reinforces fascination, and prolongs the cycle of desire. Mastery in this phase lies in balancing visibility with invisibility. The seducer must vanish sufficiently to heighten desire, yet remain just present enough in the target's consciousness to sustain psychological engagement. They must exist as a shadow, a phantom, a memory so potent that it dominates imagination and emotional response. The target's mind becomes a stage where absence is the central performance, and the seducer's influence persists without effort, presence, or explanation. The seducer's legacy is preserved through echoes, not wounds. A poorly executed exit leaves traces of bitterness, doubt, or closure that diminish fascination. A masterful exit, conversely, ensures the target remembers enchantment, excitement, and the intoxicating mystery of what was shared. Desire becomes immortalized in memory, obsession deepened by the impossibility of possession, and the seducer's power transformed into an enduring psychological artifact. Ultimately, the art of the seductive exit requires courage, precision, and strategic foresight. The seducer must relinquish immediate gratification in favor of long-term influence, maintaining control through absence, ambiguity, and the careful orchestration of memory. This is the apex of seductive power, not in the moment of conquest, but in the enduring control over thought, desire, and imagination long after physical separation. The target remains captivated, the spell unbroken, and the seducer's mastery absolute. The final act of seduction is departure, a disappearance that sustains obsession, preserves influence, and leaves echoes instead of wounds. In the silence left behind, fascination thrives. In absence, desire grows, and in memory the seducer reigns eternal. Epilogue. The dark truth of seduction. What you believe is love may only be a reflection of desire you have orchestrated. Seduction is not a gift. It is not a moral act. It is not even an expression of affection. It is a mirror, a reflection that the target chooses to step into, a space in which they willingly vanish, surrendering their certainty, their control, and sometimes themselves. The seducer does not change people. They merely expose the hidden crevices of longing, fear, and desire, and manipulate these shadows to draw the target deeper into a labyrinth of psychological dependence. What you call romance is often the careful orchestration of attention, tension, and absence. Seduction is not love, because love implies equality, mutual vulnerability, and shared truth. The seducer engages in none of these. Love is a fragile and unpredictable force, uncontrollable and untamable. Seduction, by contrast, is deliberate, calculated, and systematic. It operates not through emotion alone, but through perception, anticipation, and the manipulation of psychological patterns that exist in every human mind. Seduction is not cruelty, though it often feels like it to the target. The seducer's power comes not from inflicting pain, but from controlling desire, creating dependency, and shaping perception. They orchestrate longing, frustration, and hope in a continuous cycle, but always maintain a distance that shields them from true emotional consequence. It is an act of mastery, not malevolence, a game of influence, not vengeance. Yet to those caught in its web, it can feel indistinguishable from torment, precisely because the seducer knows how to exploit the deepest vulnerabilities without leaving obvious scars. This is the cold mastery of human longing. The seducer understands that humans do not desire objects or people. They desire meaning, fulfillment, and the resolution of emotional voids. By positioning themselves as both the key and the mystery, the seducer becomes an irresistible force. They are the mirror, the enigma, the vessel through which the target projects fantasy, obsession, and desire. In the reflection, the target disappears, willingly giving up agency, and the seducer wields influence over not just actions, but imagination itself. To those who wish to wield such power, understand that it is not a casual skill, nor a tool of amusement. Seduction is strategic, psychological, and profoundly intimate in its manipulation. It demands observation, patience, and unflinching awareness of human nature. Every gesture, word, and silence is a lever in the machinery of desire. Master it and you hold sway over minds, hearts, and the invisible currents of longing that drive human behavior. Fail, and fascination collapses into indifference, obsession into resentment, and influence into mere memory. The dark truth is simple. You do not change people, you offer them a mirror, and in that mirror they see what they most crave, fear, and long for. They step inside, sometimes blissfully unaware, sometimes trembling with recognition, and in that act of surrender, seduction is complete. Desire is no longer a choice but a consequence. Control is no longer contested but ceded, and the seducer, silent and deliberate, stands apart, untouched, observing, and ever potent. This is the art, the science, and the inevitable shadow of seduction. A realm where emotion is currency, absence is power, and the human heart is the ultimate stage. Here, longing is exploited, fascination is cultivated, and desire is transformed into mastery. And in this dark mastery, one truth remains. Seduction is neither moral nor immoral. It simply is. It exists wherever human longing exists, waiting to be observed, understood, and, for those daring enough, wielded. The mirror is ready. Step carefully. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.